I am live on the chat with Matthew Binder.
Yeah.
Matthew is the author of The Absolved and High in the Streets. Welcome to the chat.
Hey, thank you for having me.
You're welcome. Before we talk about your books, there's some fun tweets because I follow you on Twitter. And you are a funny man. I read your tweets sometimes and you make me laugh. And one of those tweets is this tweet in particular that says, I once broke up with a woman because she told me her favorite book was The Alchemist. I reread the book yesterday and stand by my decision. Did this really happen or is it a joke?
No, this really happened. When was that tweet from? I missed the date on there. It was
This
years ago.
tweet,
Okay.
well, this one's from June.
Uh-huh.
Yeah.
Yeah. So yeah, that's funny that you bring that up. So yeah, it happened many, many years ago, probably 10 years ago or so.
Okay.
And I don't know why I wrote that, but yeah, I don't know. At one point, I had just started dating someone, and I was, I guess, probably just starting to write novels, probably, yeah, 8, 9, 10 years ago or something like that. And I was probably taking myself a little bit too seriously. And I think one morning we were like at her apartment, like laying in bed, and she had on her nightstand like all these like self-help books. And
That's a
uh,
red flag. That's a red flag.
yeah, right.
Oh,
And, I just remember asking her. We got into a conversation about books, and I asked her. I remember she had The Alchemist on the top, and I started asking her about The Alchemist, and she said, "Oh my God, it's my favorite book. I reread it all the time. I can't live without it. It's my Bible."
wow.
And I had read it at some point when I was younger, and I thought, wow, I don't think we're compatible if that's your Bible. And
If
so I ended up breaking up with her. I think not like in bed, like right then, but like probably later that day. I was like, yeah, this probably isn't going to work. And then I guess when I wrote that tweet last year, I had found a copy. It's a short book, so I had found a copy at my parents' house when I was there, and so I reread it, and it reminded me of.
Did you tell her that you were breaking up with her because of the book?
I'm sure I probably did. I'm sure I probably use that as an example of our incompatibility. Yeah.
What was her response?
She probably wasn't so impressed by that. I don't imagine.
Wow. So what else? So then I have to ask, what else is a deal breaker? Would you date someone who doesn't read books?
No, no. I remember one deal breaker. Definitely, you have to. I mean, books is such a big part of my life that if I couldn't discuss books with you, then I don't know what we would talk about. Another deal. I remember as a little kid, I was at the ocean with my cousin. I was visiting my cousins, and they lived in New Jersey near the beach. And my older cousin, he had like a girlfriend, and she wouldn't swim in the ocean. Uh, and I don't remember if she was afraid of swimming or she didn't want to like mess up her hair. I don't remember what it was, but I remember saying that that would be a deal breaker for me, like someone who doesn't like get in the water at the beach. That's definitely a deal breaker.
That's another deal breaker.
Yeah.
Okay.
Do you have any deal
So
breakers?
do I have any deal breakers? Not,
Like
I don't,
fast,
I,
you know.
yeah, no, I don't, well, like to me, it has to be something big like cheating, right? It's okay. It's like cheating is definitely a deal breaker,
But
but
not
like a book or not,
on the car.
not what I'm sorry?
Bumper stickers like on the back of someone's car.
Bumper.
Is that a deal breaker for you?
I know I saw that tweet. I should have
Yeah.
grabbed a screenshot because I thought about discussing that one too. But no, the bumper stickers, I grew up in Texas in a small town, rural town in Texas. So, I've seen a lot and, you get to know people that have different ideas and do, things that perhaps if you live in the big city, you'll be like, oh my God, that's so ghetto or this or that. But um, I don't know. I try to be more understanding of people. And like I said, the deal breaker would be for me, definitely would be cheating, right?
Yeah.
Um, but a book or getting, or not getting in the water, um, and someone too, perhaps that doesn't have, you don't have to be very ambitious, but you have to have a job. right? So if you and if you don't have a job, you have to have income to sustain yourself. And if you have income, it's fine, right? But you have to do something with life, I think, at some point.
Yeah.
Um, yeah, but other than that, no, not too much. Yeah,
Okay.
that's why I asked you. I said, well, it's like when you, because we talked on Twitter about the bumper stickers. I was like, well, how good is the sex?
Yeah.
How good is the sex? Because that would, you know,
Like
measure something, I think.
I guess my point with the bumper stickers was, is I was like, right now I'm in rural Colorado, and I'm from New Mexico, and I see like all these bumper stickers, and I'm like how are people's, if you're like espousing your beliefs, whether they're political or spiritual, in like these little short, like trite, one sentence platitudes, like you're probably, your thoughts on things are not super complex. And if you're willing to let like the whole world uh like if you're willing to like show that to the whole world, like your view on something, whether it's abortion or Trump or Biden or Hillary Clinton uh, or anything, if your beliefs can be reduced down to like a trite little like one sentence platitude, then you probably don't have deep thoughts on that. And so I guess
Yeah.
that's where my little joke about the bumper stickers came from.
Yeah, well, no, you're right. Because I think a lot of, we live in this echo chamber right now, right? Whether it's abortion or Medicare for all. I think that I always say, it's like, have a plan, you're advocating for Medicare for all, make sure that, we do have a plan how we're going to pay for it. I mean, we definitely can afford it, right? And I don't want to get into Medicare for all, but that's, it's just an example of have
Yeah,
a plan. Don't just be, don't just put a bumper sticker, like you said, in your car and not really have any deep thoughts about, how we're going to pay for it or how we can make it happen. It's like, have a plan.
yeah. And I guess that's
So
what Twitter
that's what
sort
I
of
think.
is, right? It's just like digital bumper stickers where people, throw up little, throwaway one-liners. Or I mean, it can get deeper. Obviously, it does, but a lot of Twitter is just digital bumper stickers that people are, virtue signaling and just putting out their support for whatever cause du jour. Yeah.
Yeah. Cool. Well, let's talk about your books. Your first book was High in the Streets, right?
Yep. That's, well, the first one that got published at least.
Yeah. Okay. The first. So you've written other books that haven't been published yet that you're hoping will be published.
So I had written one novel before High in the Streets, which I sent out everywhere. I had never like aspired to be a writer. I was always a musician, and then
Oh, interesting.
I had quit playing in bands at one point, and then I just got like the idea on this road trip with my friends. I was on this road trip from Albuquerque to California with my friend Skip, and he was like super super sick, and he like required absolute silence in the car so he could sleep. And I didn't have like headphones or anything, and it's like a 13-hour drive, and I was just gonna do it all in one day while he slept. And so I didn't have any music, I didn't have anything to listen to, so I plotted out this novel in my head, and then when I got back to California, I started working on it. So I worked on it like nonstop for like 2 years. And then I didn't run like literary circles. I didn't know how you get books published or anything like that. So I started submitting it to agents and everything. And it was universally rejected, like no one, it was not a good book. It was my first stab at it. And so, yeah, it was universally rejected. And then I started High in the Streets as soon as I got over the heartbreak of being rejected so frequently. So yeah, then I wrote High in the Streets, and then that
How
came
many
out
times did you get? How many times were you rejected, you said?
for the first one. Oh, I don't know, probably 50, 60 rejections.
Oh,
It wasn't,
wow.
it wasn't good. Yeah.
So, so at that point you said, okay, I've had 50 rejections. It's probably not a good book. I need to write something else.
Right. So then I sat down and wrote High in the Streets, and uh, I that one got accepted at a small press like right away, and I was just so happy that it got accepted that I didn't really like
Mhm.
wait to see what else could happen. So I was just happy to get it published. So that came out in 2016. And then I finished that. Yeah. So that came out in April of 2016. And then I knew I wanted to write another novel, and I was living in Albuquerque.
Before we jump to that, tell us what High in the Streets is about.
Sure. It's essentially about this guy who sort of values freedom above all else, and he is kind of a hedonist, and he sort of stumbles into this great success at one point in his life, kind of a fluke, and he gets a lot of money and all the trappings of like the American dream, right? He gets the money, the big house. He gets access to a woman that he would never have had access to before he had money. And then the book takes place like 5 years after this great success, and he's very like listless and ineffectual, and he doesn't really understand why he's unhappy because he has everything that he thinks he's supposed to have. And then at the beginning of the book, there's an event that occurs, and this life starts unraveling, and the whole book takes place over the course of about 1 week.
Oh wow!
And so yeah, this sort of perfect life sort of unravels, and he sort of figures out what is really important to him.
Okay, nice. So you, after this, you wrote your second book. Was that the Absolved, or?
Yeah, so the next book was The Absolved, and
Nice.
I was living in Albuquerque at the time. That's where I'm from, and I was working for like a solar company, solar energy company. And one night I like watched Anthony Bourdain's Parts Unknown on the city of Budapest, and I'd never been to Budapest, but I thought it was like really cool on the TV show. And then the next day at work, I was like in a meeting, and I Googled like this cost of living index that like of like every major city in the world, like indexes like what is like a gallon of gas cost, what is a dozen eggs cost, what is a studio apartment cost. And I realized Budapest was like really, really cheap. And I knew I wanted to write another book, and I had an idea for another book, which the book that became The Absolved. So I just like quit my job that day, and I moved to Budapest like 2 or 3 weeks later. And I lived in Budapest for pretty much most of 2016. So like, I think like May of 2016 to like January or February of 2017. And so I wrote the book there. I wrote The Absolved in Budapest.
Okay. What's your favorite memory of Budapest? Do you have one?
I had the best time. It was a really strange thing. I was like consciously aware that I was having, this was like the best my life would ever be. Like, which was like a strange thing, because like I was in this like beautiful city. I had no responsibilities or like obligations other than exactly the work that I wanted to be doing, which was writing this book. I was sitting on a big pile of money because I had a really good job for the last couple of years. So I wasn't like stressed about money at all. And the work was going well, and the city is beautiful. And like, I got really lucky. Like my first week in Budapest, I met, this Swiss film director who had been living in Budapest for like 15 years. And we quickly became like really good friends. And he was sort of like my key to the city. I sort of think of him as like the unofficial mayor of Budapest. So he introduced me to a lot of people. I made a lot of friends, and it was, it was perfect. It was great.
It was good. So how much, because you talked about, how inexpensive it is to live there. So how much would you spend a month like living in Budapest?
I had a small but like nice studio apartment in like a cool part of town. And I think I paid $275 a month for the apartment.
Oh, wow.
Yeah. So like, I moved to New York City or after Budapest, and, my first week just paying, you live in New York, paying to rent an apartment and paying, 1 month's rent or the security deposit was more than I paid in rent for, 6 months in
6 months.
Yeah. And there was no security. Wow. There was, you just paid cash and to someone up front, and they're just like happy to have cash. And then I had an apartment for 8 months or whatever. Yeah.
No scams.
No, yeah, like the guy was great. My landlord was great. Yeah.
Cool. So tell us what the Absolve is about.
The Absolved. So the impetus for writing the Absolved was a conversation I had with my brother at one point, probably about 5 years ago. My brother, he's an oncologist, a cancer physician, and we were talking about AI and automation displacing people from the workforce, like in the future.
Yeah.
And my brother could be like a little bit sanctimonious about things. And he basically said, in the future, people will just have to work a little bit harder to make themselves indispensable in the economy the way that I have. And I'm like, brother, in 20 years, like AI is gonna be making like much better medical decisions than you ever could. So yeah, that was like the impetus for writing the book. And it's basically about this physician, the 20 years in the future from when I wrote it. So the book takes place in 2036. Most of the population, or a large part of the population, has been displaced from work, and they're referred to this new lower socioeconomic class is referred to the absolved because they've been absolved of the burden of work, and they live off of like a universal basic income provided by the government, but it's not really enough to like really enjoy your life. It's basically enough where they, people live in like favela-like housing with like really good Wi-Fi and are pacified by virtual reality sex. But the main character in this book is this sort of wealthy physician who's part of the elite class, and he ends up like losing his job. And so part of the book is about like what happens when you don't have work to do. It's like
Right.
like the San Francisco futurist type people say, oh, once people are absolved of the burden of work, they'll be freed up for more noble ambitions like poetry or making music or gardening or mountain climbing or whatever. And I'm like, yeah, some people will do that, but like most people will just fall victim to boredom and vice. And so, yeah, that's kind of what the impetus of the book was. And then the book is set against like the 2036 election. So I was writing it during the 2016 campaign season. So I was sort of following the rise of Donald Trump as the presidential candidate. So I worked that into the novel, where basically there's this fringe populist candidate in 2036 who says we've pursued technology at the expense of humanity, and Henry, the main character, after he loses his job, he sort of falls in with like these sympathizers, or like these people who follow, are loyal to this sort of rabid populist candidate, and they end up framing him for an anti-technology terrorist act. And then Henry sort of inadvertently, the main character Henry, becomes a sort of a folk hero, like an accidental folk hero to like the populist masses. Okay. I was trying to write with like during 2016, like all my friends, probably a lot of your friends, were Democrats, and we just couldn't imagine this, like what people would see in Trump. But like I kind of tried to write with sympathy for these people that have been left behind, and like the economy is not working for them anymore, right? So when the system does not work for enough people, you hit that critical threshold, then the society is sort of ripe for some form of revolution. So that's what the Absolved is about.
Yeah, well, and you make a good point. I think, the reason a lot of people voted for Trump is because they feel the economy is not working for them. But anyway, I'm glad we don't have to deal with that anymore for now.
Yeah.
With Trump anyway. Hopefully he won't be back in 4 years. So have you written anything for TV, or are you just writing books for now? Have you written any screenplays or pilots for TV?
Yeah, so I've written after the Absolved, a director named Zach Heiserling, who made a really cool documentary called Cutie and the Boxer a bunch of years ago, which got like nominated for like an Academy Award for Best Documentary. Him and I collaborated on a screenplay sort of inspired by the Absolved called The Trucker. It's about a truck driver in the future who, sort of a blue collar truck driver who gets displaced to like driverless cars, right? So eventually, like all drivers are going to get displaced.
Yeah.
So that screenplay exists in the world. I wrote another film. I don't even remember what it was called. Shortly after that, and then a producer from NBC Universal, a guy named Matt Whitney, who's the executive producer on a show called Chicago Fire. He read the Absolved, the book, and so last year, and then so we've been sort of jointly developing the Absolved as like a more of like a thriller type TV show. So the book is sort of like a dark satire, but we basically took like the bones of the book and are making like more of a traditional like thriller drama, sort of along the lines of like Mr. Robot. So this year, it's with like NBC Universal. That's where he's with, but we're going to try and sell it to one of like the streaming services. So
Okay.
hopefully it ends up at like Netflix or Hulu or Amazon or something like that.
Yeah, or Amazon Video. At the beginning of our chat, you mentioned something that I wanted to talk about, which, you still are a musician, right? You still play?
Yeah.
Yeah. So you were mentioning, that you weren't really thinking of becoming an author and you didn't know where to start. So if there's someone out there who wants to start writing a book and they don't know where to start, what tips do you have for them, or how, what should they do to get their book published?
Well, first I have to write the book, which is
Yes, first write the book.
and writing the book. I think a lot of people have ambitions of writing a book, and that's great. And they get started, and it's a long slog to write a novel or any kind of book. Really,
I have a question about that because, you see all these, I'm not going to mention any names, but you see a lot of reality TV stars that are not writers
uh-huh.
and, they become authors. So if someone when you say first write the book, because I don't understand what the process is. Let's say if you're a reality star that's never written anything and they get a book deal and then all of
Yeah,
a sudden they have a book. So do
they
they
have,
just go ahead?
I was going to say they're not actually writing the book. Those people
Okay.
have they work with ghostwriters, and I have friends who are working novelists, and what they do for income really is they write books for people like a reality TV star. So basically, the reality TV star sits for a lot of interviews, with this writer, and then the writer tries to get like an idea of their voice and their story, and they sort of together, sort of collaboratively like craft like the narrative that they want to tell. But the reality TV star is not usually the one who's going to sit down and do the heavy lifting of sitting at the keyboard and writing day in and day out for a year or two.
So it's a ghostwriter is what they call
Ghostwriter, yeah.
it. Okay. Um,
But for most
so
people,
now I forgot what.
the real
Go ahead.
challenge, I think, is doing the actual work. So for me, I don't like try and wait till I'm inspired to sit down and write. Like I keep like work hours for writing. So depending on like what I'm doing with my day job or whatever, like I try and work like 7 a.m. till 10 a.m. every day. I sit at the desk and write. And some days, and I try to not get up until I've written like a certain number of words. So usually I aim in like a 3-hour period to hit like 1,000 words, like if it's a first draft.
Okay.
And so that really helps me to maintain like accountability. I know people, and that allows me to actually like get work done. Where I know some writers or people who say they're writers, they've been working on the same half-finished draft of a novel for 6 years, and it's because they're not doing the work, right? They'll sit down and write a chapter when they're feeling very inspired, but then they won't pick it back up again for 3 months, right? Where I work this 5 or 6 days a week, every week for 2 years at a time.
Yeah. Cool. Well, thank you for coming on the chat, Matthew. I enjoyed talking to you. Where can people follow you on Twitter and on Instagram? What's your handle?
My Instagram, I think it's just Matthew_P_Binder. And then Twitter, it's just at mbinder711. Yeah.
711.
Yeah.
Okay. And you can follow me on social media. I'm on Instagram, on Twitter, very active on Twitter. I am live on the chat. And please subscribe to my YouTube channel. And you can also support my channel through Venmo, Cash App by supporting independent creators at Live on the Chat. Well, thank you, Matthew. I will see you on Twitter.
All right, buddy. Thanks so much.
Bye.
Bye.